Hey guys, Waterfowler41 here, and in today's video we are going to be finishing up the Core 4x4 rear end installation. So a couple videos back I went ahead and installed Core 4x4 rear lower control arms. Now in this video we're going to be finishing up that with the upper rear control arms. So if you look underneath the truck here, you can see the lower control arm right there, and just above it, peeking out right about here, is the rear upper control arm. So we're going to go ahead and swap that out with a very similar piece to what I already have on the lower side. It's just the complementary Core 4x4 one for the uppers. So just like the lowers, these have a welded Johnny joint on one end of it and then a poly bushing on the other end of it, as well as Zerk fittings. So I went ahead and installed the Zerk fittings on here, and then once we get everything installed, we will go ahead and grease everything up. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into the tools here and then start working on the installation. So as far as removing these, pretty simple. It's just kind of unbolt the stock and then bolt these guys in. You're gonna need 21 and 24 millimeter wrenches, as well as, what is this? 21 and 24 millimeter and 15/16 if you have it, for the hardware that they send with the kit. So also have a breaker bar. These guys are on there pretty tight. We learned with the lowers that the breaker bar was definitely needed, and I actually had to extend this guy a little bit to get past that 200 foot-pounds is what they torqued down at factory. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just dive right into it. So as far as removal of this, I'm not sure if I need to jack up the rear end like I did with the with the lower ones. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and leave everything as is, not going to jack up the differential, and just start to unbolt it. So if I could unbolt the upper control arms and move those bolts freely through them, at that point I don't think I need to jack anything up. I'll just unbolt one side, pull it out, put the Core 4x4 one in, and go ahead and do the other side. So let's rock and roll. Okay, so I got the nuts off on the passenger side. Whew. Similar to the lower control arms, these guys definitely put up a fight. So I got the nuts off, I still have the bolts in there, and for the most part that control arm is pretty loose, so I think we should be in good shape without jacking up the rear diff. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock these bolts out of here, and then just go ahead and slip the Core 4x4 arm right up into place and use the supplied hardware on that guy to get it installed. So let's go ahead and do it. Whew. I needed a lot of energy on that one. So this is 24 millimeter nuts and 21 millimeter bolts on this guy to undo it. So I put a wrench on one side, and then I put a socket on the other side to knock it off. All right, so let's go ahead and get this guy popped out, and I think just based on the amount of play I have in this guy right now, we should be all right without having to jack it up. So let's get on it. Okay, so I have my factory upper control arm out, and I have it side by side with the new Core 4x4 one that's going to replace it. So one thing I do before I install these guys is double check the length. Now I trust Core 4x4 did their homework. These are fixed lengths, so these should be one size for the OEM suspension in the rear. So a good way to check that is to put the control arms side by side like I have them here, and then take one bolt and then thread it through. If it threads through easily between both control arms, then they're the exact same size. The other way I see people do it is they'll put it on one side and they'll try to swing it on over onto, they'll try to basically pivot it onto the other bolt. That's not going to give you a true check as far as the size. So the best way to do it is put them side by side, thread one bolt straight through, and then try to thread that second bolt straight through. If they don't fit, get on the phone and figure out what the issue is, because these are fixed length and these ones should definitely fit. So let's go ahead and get this guy thrown into the truck. So similar to the lower control arms, I'm gonna take the poly, and I believe I put this one in the rear, and then the Johnny joint will go on the front, and I'll have access to those Zerk fittings on both ends of it. So let's go ahead and drop that in. All right, so we are completely installed here. I just gotta torque everything down. So the trick to this guy is to have a really big hammer, a dead blow hammer, and pretty much every hammer in between, as well as a ton of leverage on your breaker bar, because that back bolt, this guy on the OEM control arms really put up a good fight. So after you get that guy loosened up, it's all downhill from there. So again, I installed the rear first. I have the poly joint back here, similar to what I have here, and then I have the Johnny joint up here. I have the bolts threaded in from the outboard side of the truck into the inside, and then the nuts are on the inside, and I went ahead and tightened everything down. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side, and then I'll come back through and torque everything down. I believe these are 150 foot-pounds, and then from there I will go ahead and grease everything, and I'll throw some new grease on my existing control arm. So let's go ahead over to the driver's side and get that guy removed and swapped out with the core 4x4. Okay, so I am laying underneath the spare tire, underneath the rear of the truck. I have my breaker bar on the rear bolt of that upper control arm. I have a wrench on the other side balancing on top of it. So I just want to show you how I was able to get enough leverage to loosen this bad boy up. This is not exactly scientific. It works. You got to be really careful and proceed with your own at your own risk. So basically what it is, put my breaker bar in there, extend it 1 foot out, and then gently grab that as well as my sway bar, and that's all you need to do. You gotta be really careful that you don't slip off, but you can see my wrench way back up in there. It's actually pushing on the frame as I loosened it, so that's holding that side of the bolt. You don't need to go crazy with it, but just enough to get this guy going, and then you could slip an air ratchet in there or electric ratchet to get it the rest of the way. So that's how I broke this bolt. I already got the front one off. It's super easy. So let's go ahead and get this guy swapped out and take a look at everything. Okay, so I have both the control arms on. I have not greased them yet or torqued them down, but let's walk through the process real quick. So I started at the front with a 24mm socket and a 21mm wrench, loosen up the factory hardware. I was able to leave that nut on while I loosen up the rear. The rear is going to take a lot of extra leverage. So one thing that I thought might be really helpful is if I would have parked the truck up on ramps or had it up on a lift, I would have been able to put a ton more torque on the bottom of that bolt. Unfortunately, I have the truck parked in my garage, so I only got whatever ground clearance I have on the truck to get leverage on there. Ultimately, it worked out. I basically put a wrench on the outside or on the nut here, and then I just beat the crap out of it with a dead blow hammer until it loosened up enough that I could hit it with the impact and loosen up the rest of the way. As far as tightening up everything, just reverse it. So you lift up everything, you drop it in the rear saddle bracket there, put the bolt through there, and then do the same thing here. Make sure that your zerks are down so you have access to them. And then with my core 4x4s, I left the polys in the rear. You can see here, this is the poly bushing. So the poly's here, and then the Johnny joints are here up in the front. So I'm going to go ahead and torque everything down. I believe it's 150 foot-pounds. So I'm going to try to get some leverage on this guy. I might park it up on the ramps in order to torque everything down. It might be easier to get to it. But then after that, I'm going to go through and grease everything up and take it for a test drive. But that is how you finish up the installation of core 4x4 control arms on these new Ram trucks. So one thing I didn't do is add my core 4x4 sticker. So maybe I'll add it on the outside of there. But that is how you install these bad boys. So if you got any questions on how to install these, definitely leave a question down in the comments if you have it, or reach out to me on Instagram. If not, reach out to Core 4x4 team. Spence over at Core 4x4 is a super helpful dude. Their customer service is top notch. So if you have any questions regarding these for your application, certainly reach out to him. So these are the Core 4x4 rear control arms, so the lower and upper in their red powder coat. So this pops real nicely with my differential cover and with the red accents on the Rebel. So with that said, thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it all. Thanks.